You're listening to an IOE podcast.
Powered by UCL Minds.
Welcome to the Staffroom. I'm Elaine Long.
And I am Mark Quinn.
We are programme leaders on the UCL Early Career Teacher programme. Why are we in the Staffroom? We're here because this is where the best professional learning conversations always take place. This is where problems faced by teachers and leaders today can be explored critically and where meaningful connections between research and practice can be made.
Over the course of the series, we'll hear the voices of different colleagues as they come into the staff room, from ECTs to academics and executive leaders. We'll talk about all things education, the challenges and the joys. So why don't you enjoy a coffee with us, perhaps even grab a biscuit and sit down for an hour of staff room chat. Welcome to the staff room, Dr. Louise Stoll. You're in our staff room now, Louise, so you've got to sit down, put your feet up, take the weight off your feet. My first job is to bring you a drink and something to eat. So it's early in the morning. So what can I bring you?
Well, it's really hot. So I'd like a cool drink and ice if there is any. And I wondered if you got any cordial with, something gingery in it, because I want something with a bit of zing.
We've got about lime and ginger. Does that sound good to you?
Sounds fab. Okay. Yeah.
I'll break some ice off as well off the back of the fridge and stick that in it too.
Excellent.
A biscuit or anything of that sort?
Home baked or school baked energy bar. Something with an interesting spice in. I'd be curious to taste something like that.
Right. I need to put my apron on. Put the oven on, preheat it, and start baking some biscuits for you.
That'll do.
Mark, I feel like these orders are getting harder and harder for you, but actually I'll also have that cool drink as well. That sounds nice. If you could pop that across for me with the side of biscuits. And in the meantime, Louise Stoll, we're delighted to have you in the staff room, particularly as your work has influenced us so much as leaders of professional learning. We know that our listeners will be very excited to hear you talk to your work as well. But before we get there, could you just tell us a bit about yourself and your career, and particularly what gives you the most joy?
Wonderful. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's great to take time out and come to be in the staff room with both of you. Me and my career and joy. Wonderful. So I grew up in London, and my professional journey, it's given me the opportunity to work in many countries. And that includes living in Canada for almost 6 years, a while ago. I should say my professional journey is quite long. So it's been going for a while. I started as a primary teacher in inner London. I thought I might become an educational psychologist. Mum was doing a lot of work in special needs, and I was really interested in that. But I got waylaid. I saw an ad pretty early on in my career, and it was for 4 experienced teachers, so I cheated already. And that was to be seconded as field officers on this amazing research project that was called the Junior School Project, and it followed 2,000 children for 4 years through 50 inner London primary schools to look at the effects of schooling on a wide range of outcomes. It followed a secondary school project called 15,000 Hours, and my boss had been a member of the team, and he led that project. And as field officers, we looked at the outcomes, what should school affect? Does school make a difference? And we actually called the book that came out of our findings School Matters, because we found that it did, which is good news and also really important. But we felt as field officers that we should be looking at more than they had reading, maths, behaviour and attendance. And in those days, even looking at behaviour and attendance was pretty good. And we managed to expand that to looking at attitude, self-concept, writing, practical maths, and back on the agenda now, oracy, speaking skills. We wanted to find something in the arts, and we never managed to find the right kind of assessment. And we all know that what gets assessed gets valued. So that was a challenge. But I spent my time as a field officer going into schools, observing teachers, interviewing teachers, head teachers, a whole range of things. It was the most wonderful experience. And then we followed that group into secondary school, so in a secondary transfer project. And after that, I sort of said to myself, well, so what? We seem to have found out the beautiful place. We found out some characteristics of school effectiveness. What makes a school effectiveness? How do you get there? I still had my, I'm a teacher at heart. I was interested in the development. And I had the opportunity was I went into my boss's office and said, with all your contacts in the States and Canada, is there somewhere I might go for 6 months or something? And he said, how's about Toronto? And actually, it was about 30 miles from there in a wonderful school district that was working in those days like a local authority, was working with 3 others. So it was working in a consortium, even back in those days. And we were working with the university, with OISE and the University of Toronto. And people like Michael Fullen and Andy Hargreaves were my colleagues there. Andy had just come out of England. I'd come out of England. Went for 6 months, stayed nearly 6 years. And I did my PhD at that time on what we were working on in the district, which was using the findings of research to help bring about improvement. And that's been a strand of my life. And I came back to the Institute of Education, working again with Peter, who had been my boss, Peter Mortimer, who had he had supervised my PhD. He was my mentor, and he became the director of the Institute of Education. And I worked with a wonderful group of colleagues across the Institute, and also school leaders, local authority leaders. We worked with policy people, and we developed a centre, the International School Effectiveness and Improvement Centre, and worked very much in the way that the Centre for Educational Leadership works. Very much outward focused, doing research and development and professional learning and working with our colleagues. I seemed to be going in cycles at that time of about 7 years. And I felt it was time for a change. And an opportunity came up, which really surprised me, because it was the last thing I considered for myself. I never thought that I would be a professor. And I applied to become a professor of professional learning at the University of Bath. And I went to Bath, and I spent, in that case, it was just over 3 years. And at that time, I was I led a project on evaluating the impact of the Key Stage 3 pilot, and worked with colleagues at the Institute on that, and also got very involved in something that's been a strand of my work, perhaps we'll talk about a little bit later, but which was the first study in England about creating and sustaining professional learning communities. And I really, really missed London. London is, I grew up here. It's not for everyone, but it's very much in my heart. So my little thread brought me back to London, and I came back and I connected with the Institute as a visiting professor, and then as a professor of professional learning, part-time, working part-time at the Institute and part-time working here, there and everywhere. That's a good title for a song.
For a career.
Well, yeah, it's a good title for a career as well, isn't it? And doing a whole range of projects with colleagues, increasingly getting involved in something that's really interesting to me, which is evaluating innovative programs and development opportunities, couple in the health service, and leadership in British Columbia, the Transformative Educational Leadership Program; in England, the Big Leadership Adventure, which is now called Big Education Leadership Program; and also working a lot with colleagues such as yourselves, which has been really part of what makes me most joyful. For example, one out of which came a resource we developed called Catalyst for teacher leaders and middle leaders, and that was working with challenge partners, so working with groups and coming together to say what are the questions that we want to ask, and how can we answer them, and how can we work together to answer them, and learn together, and working on that over a period of time. And then, like with the professional learning communities project, where we would bring our schools together, but ultimately we said, what do you want out of this? And they said, we'd like some resources. So developing resources to help them. So I am, oh dear, I find it very strange to use the word. I am officially retired from my post at UCL Institute of Education. I'm an emerita professor now. However, I am still very much working, and I am an applied researcher. Some people describe me as a pracademic, and that is an academic who loves practice and loves working with practitioners. I also work with policymakers. And it can come from the other way round. I mean, I would see you as pracademics. You started in teaching, spent a lot of time in teaching and leadership, and are working in academia or in a university now. And I love working with leaders to support them in animating, bringing to life research findings in their own context. I'm not an expert in anybody's context. I understand the research, and we come together for that. So working with others to create those kinds of materials. And I also get a lot of joy these days from being a critical friend, and that is a term that I came across when I worked in Canada many years ago. It's not my term. I brought it back to England and started talking about it, and it was working on the governing bodies and school effectiveness document, and put it in there. And in many ways, it's spread in a lot of ways. And now I'm coming across several colleagues, both here and in Canada. I work in Canada still, particularly in British Columbia. And they say that they prefer the term curious friend. And I think that's lovely, working with others, doing what some people would describe as wisdom work, which is drawing on my research, drawing on other people's research, because I don't only use my own research, drawing on other experience, things that I've come across that I think are fascinating, exciting, and what I've learned from many people over many years.
It's interesting, Louise, that you use that word curiosity, because I had so many questions I wanted to ask you about your professional journey, not least what it's like hanging out with Andy Hargreaves and Michael Fulham in Toronto and all those exciting things you've done. But what really struck me was that first job advert you applied for a field officer, and then how your whole career sort of developed from that curiosity to find out more about how students learn and how education works, and why schools matter and how we can make the best of schools to support students. I was kind of thinking to myself, I'm not sure that you would get a job advertisement for a field officer today, but what an amazing thing if you did, because I love that connection between research and practice. And I think, wouldn't that be an amazing thing now if we did have opportunities for teachers in school to be field officers and work so closely with researchers at universities?
Yeah, absolutely. It was, in fact, it was in the ILEA, in the London Education Authority, Contact magazine. I was a teacher in Camden, in Kilburn, and it was the ILEA, which was a huge local authority, had its own research department, research and statistics, and they carried out a range of amazing projects, fascinating. And it was funded by the local authority. It was a huge amount of money at that time. Now and they really believed Peter he'd been a teacher himself. He'd been a music teacher. I think that's what he was kind of attracted to in me, because I loved music, even though I'd been teaching for so little time. I mean, the others all were very experienced teachers. And yes, that bringing together of researchers and teachers, school leaders, so important. And I know that there were opportunities for secondments and things like that in when Blair was in government, and in that time there was a lot of emphasis on a whole range of professional learning opportunities. And also in terms of universities, I think we're not unique at the Institute. But some universities are much better than others, I would say, at having those close relationships with practitioners. Here and in other countries, and in some other countries, there's no tradition at all,
Yeah. I'm not sure we declared or disclosed fully at the beginning of this thing, Louise, that you've been our curious friend at the Centre for Educational Leadership for a number of years now. And I think you're wrong to say that you've only recently moved into your wisdom work. You've been doing that for a long time as well. And I think listeners, hearing you talk about your career will understand why Elaine said that you've been influencing our work for such a long time. It's that your invitation into the staff room is long overdue. We want to particularly ask you right now about a strand of your development work and of your research, which is the concept or issue of capacity for learning. There's many things we could talk about. I'm going to talk about that first. Because we know that you're really interested in it. We think that our listeners will be really interested in it. So if you could just give us some definition, first of all, what you mean by that phrase, capacity for learning, and why it matters so much.
It's something I first got interested in nearly 30 years ago. And in preparing for this, I'm someone who likes to prepare extremely well for things and then abandon my plans because I can draw on that. And I'm thinking back over 30 years and getting into that and really thinking about capacity. A lot of people talk about it. It's almost like a bucket to be filled. And once you've filled it up, you're at capacity. And for me, it's much more a power equality. It's people anywhere in the system and their partners who are working with them, and schools really being able to engage in and sustain learning and keep on learning for a collective purpose of enhancing pupils' learning in its broadest sense, pupil learning and well-being. And it allows people on their own and together to keep that learning from the world around them, apply the learning to new situations so that they keep on a path to their own goals in a context that's ever changing. And if you've got capacity for learning, if you have that, you're really open to engaging with and embracing the transformations that we need to address the complex educational challenges we're facing. And why did I get into it? Well, I think really because of this sense that we have to prepare children for the future in a fast-changing world. And the world as it was when I started is not as it is now. And it's changing every day, as we know. And one of the most powerful things that struck me was a few years ago, I read a book called The 100-Year Life, which drew on findings, research findings from all over the world, that children who are born in the West today, have more than a 50% chance of living to being over 105. And that means that many of the children in our schools, even children who are 15, 16, 17 will be living late into the 21st century, into the 22nd century, and so on. And that means, if they're living in the 22nd century and it's fast changing, the world, we don't know where the world will be, but we do know all the issues we're facing now. And some of them we might say are opportunities like AI, but if we don't take note of them, they can become a crisis. My colleague Claire Cinema and I, friend and colleague at the University of Auckland, write about this and talk about a coalescence of challenges, that it's really a crisis, and whether it's the environment, whether it's what's happened as a result of COVID, disinformation, misinformation, continuing poverty, the haves and have-nots, the issues of technology, finance, etc. And if you're going to be living for a long time, the three-part life that some of us might have had of being educated, having a career, and then retiring is not going to make any sense, as Linda Grattan and Andrew Scott say. And I started working on this, creating capacity before that, but it's become all the more urgent for us. And then we have, the pressures that teachers are under, and the fallout after COVID, and the mental health issues, and the increased complex needs of children, and teachers' own mental health issues, recruitment, retention. And so, for me, we have to be focusing on how do we create that capacity where people feel the curiosity that you were so interested in, Elaine. They feel that curiosity. They want to love learning, keep on learning. They have to keep on learning, connecting with others, still feeling optimistic, feeling a sense of self-efficacy and collective efficacy, connecting with others. We really need to connect with others. We really need to think about the fact that different generations are orienting themselves in different ways and want different things. The younger generations of teachers are looking for different things than I'm looking for. And all of that means that we really need to focus on that.
So, Louise, I hear you talking about the pupils' capacity for learning, and I know that you are. You see there's a direct connection between a pupil's capacity to learning and capacity for professional learning. These things do go hand in hand, and that's clear from what you've said so far. I'm just wondering, for the purposes of this podcast, most of our listeners are teachers. I guess we like to think that we're influencing policy, but I'm not sure how much the Secretary of State sits down with a cup of lime and ginger cordial and listens to Staffroom podcast. But I can imagine that we've got ECTs and mentors and other school teachers out there listening to you talk about this confluence of challenges, scratching their heads like I am now and thinking, what can I do about that? I've got my class of year fives to deal with, or my GCSE class I've just got rid of. If you had a special message just for those listeners, those teachers doing that kind of chalk, the chalk-based job, what would that be?
Well, I think in many ways it's the same and it is different for teachers. It's in many ways it's their own inner leadership, because I see this as a leadership challenge both inside and outside of schools. But I go into schools in very, very similar situations, and I see completely different places. And remember, I did say I don't consider myself the absolute expert on that. The people in there are the experts. But the schools with similar levels of deprivation, or people who've been there the same amount of time, all of those kinds of things, similar levels of, So really, it's being that kind of leader yourself, as well as thinking about the potential, maybe if you're a mentor, of becoming moving on as a leader, and really within your space, connecting more than anything else, I think, is being part of a community, being part of a learning community. And I think that often requires some people and in more senior positions to help the conditions for you to be able to do that, the time, the space, etc. But getting together and being part of and stimulating learning conversations, finding resources, whether they be videos, whether they be articles, whether it is taking the opportunity to observe each other and give each other feedback. It's
right. But I think that's really key, isn't it? That I posed to you, what should our individual teachers be thinking about this when they're facing these confluence of challenges, and how do I teach for a child who might be 105 one day? And actually, your answer is it's not your job on your own, right? It's that you achieve this by collaborating, by working with others, by having your professional networks.
Yes. And so much of this, having your professional networks, connecting with people, whether it's face-to-face or through technology in other places, in other parts of the world. If we want children to be creative and creative thinkers, teachers need to develop that. Not only do they need to develop the sort of pedagogies that will help them do that, but they need to be able to do it for themselves. They need to be inquisitive and take the opportunity to engage in inquiry and to use research. I have the benefit. I know that this is an audio podcast, but I can see that Elaine was just about to say something.
I was just going to say, Louise, you mentioned that these sorts of activities don't happen in a vacuum, and it's leaders that create the conditions in which people have the time and space and inclination to come together and collaborate. And we'll certainly have leaders listening to this podcast, and definitely people that engage in professional learning. So what are the conditions in which capacity for learning is seeded and flourishes and is sustainable? What has your research taught you about that?
Well, again, my research and others. So that facilitative leadership, it is really important that teachers and others feel genuinely part of developing a shared and inspiring vision for the future of children, working towards a purpose they care about, capturing their interest, capturing their imagination and their hearts, so that they're committed to that journey ahead, because there's going to be lots of detours. I remember in a project that I did working with a development project with a group of school leaders, and we always start our projects with a survey, and this one was related to professional learning communities, and and the question was about shared vision, and we gave it, the head teacher filled it out, but so did the teachers and support staff. And the head teacher, the primary head, and there were primary and secondary and special schools involved in this. And I remember one primary head saying, "Goodness me, there I was merrily thinking we were all, moving along together, and people aren't clear about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And so it is incredibly important to have something you really care about. And we know from some other research we've done more recently, working in Wales, that when people feel that they are part of a school that is a learning organisation with a clear purpose and committed to ongoing professional learning, working and learning together in teams, opportunities for growing leadership, opportunities for inquiry and exploration, etc., etc. Staff, in our survey of over 1,700 people, and these were support staff, teachers, middle, senior leaders, they had expressed more job satisfaction. This is a good place to be. And also they said, we had a couple of questions about students' needs being met, but they had a question about their own needs being met. And they felt their own needs were being met. These are better places to be. And one of the other key areas, Elaine, is the area of trust, risk-taking. And we are in a really, really difficult environment, I think, in England, where it's hard to try something new. I mean, I remember in another one of my projects, we interviewed over 300 people, and one of the things we asked them was, what happens if what's the worst thing that can happen if a teacher experiments with their practice, tries something, for example, on a wet Tuesday afternoon? What's the worst? And it was talk about wet. It was like the floodgates came. We'll have children climbing the walls. We will feel foolish in front of our peers because parents will go mad. We'll fail the inspection and so on. And this is just trying something new. And then that wasn't everybody who said that. Most people, when we probed them and pushed them, and they were reflecting, it was about having the confidence to do that. And you need the conditions. You need people to enable you to take risks, to say it's not going to be perfect the first time. There's it really is important for leaders at all levels to encourage people to try things out and to be there to support and to learn. We learn from that. And if we also don't have trust between colleagues, people won't open up their classrooms.
It's really interesting because there's a lot of debate, I think, about different types of professional learning and models of professional learning and the time that professional learning should take. But, what I'm hearing from you is that if those conditions aren't there, professional learning will not be successful. So those conditions are foundational. And that's a good challenge for leaders of professional learning, I think, to ask themselves the question, do people in my school feel genuinely committed? Have I done enough to communicate our values and bring people into that so they feel authentically like they have a voice? And I think another powerful challenge is, have I done enough to make teachers in my school feel safe to take risks? Because if I haven't, it doesn't matter what sort of model of professional learning we have or how much time we're giving or how whizzy our platform is. Those things are a foundation. If that trust isn't there, nothing will work. And I suppose I'm talking personally now, so this is my opinion, but I tend to find we spend a lot of time debating the other things. Should we use instructional coaching, or should we use this, or should we use that? And actually, maybe we need to spend more time in schools as leaders of professional learning thinking about the foundational conditions of trust and risk taking and authentic purpose. And I think that's a really powerful point you make.
I think all the more we are realizing, those of and some of us might say that we have been realizing it for a long time, that a lot of educational change has been neck up, and it's about the head, and it's also about doing it. And it
took me a while to understand that when you said neck up.
Yeah,
it's about the head and the cognitive. Yeah,
it's about relationships. It's about, my colleagues who are studying social network theory and how who can you go to both for emotional support, but also for ideas, resources, advice, etc. It's relational. It's really important. And it's not like, because when we try, a part of leadership is about stimulating learning conversations, we do need to be able to challenge each other. And if I challenge you, Elaine, oh my goodness, I'd better be ready because you may challenge me back. And therefore, it's not just about staying. I mean, you mentioned Andy Hargreaves, and he's done a lot of work on this. A wonderful woman, Judith Warren Little in the States, talked about the difference between congeniality and collegiality. And congeniality, we all get on well, and we want that. We want Staffroom, this Staffroom, to be really nice and to be offered a nice drink. And believe me, drink and food is a really important point of this. And it brings to mind Tangent, one of the secondary schools in our professional learning communities project. The maths department was basically in a cupboard in the corridor, but the door was always open, and there was always a smell of coffee coming from there, and people would walk past and chat. But we really want that congeniality, but we want the ability to be able to probe each other and to be able to challenge our assumptions, because what we did before, and including that, some of the research that tells us what is effective is always done sort of from the past and retrospectively, and we have to be learning our way into the future, particularly when we're thinking about some of the competencies that we hope people will start being able to learn how to evidence in different ways.
So, like a pro, Louise, you just queued up my next question. Although I do hope that smell of coffee from that maths department also included the smell of home-baked energy biscuits that you can smell wafting around the staff room right now. I'm Mr. Sunshine on this podcast, as everyone knows, and therefore I insist on a bit of optimism. So if you can, Louise, when you're projecting into this future and about how you hope or expect or feel that schools need to change over the coming years to address the opportunities that you've been talking about, but also the challenges you've been talking about, are you hopeful?
I am hopeful. I am hopeful. I would love. How can I sprinkle some of my hopeful dust over everyone in this podcast? Being brave and taking risks. I'm going. Again, you're making me think about something different, which is, I guess in some ways, all of my life, I have taken some risks. I've taken, I think, probably in most cases, what are very safe risks. I'm going to live in Canada and living after you've lived in inner city London and I lived in a very, very small town in Ontario was a risk. I wasn't living in the jungle, in a rainforest in Brazil. But I've always pushed myself, and I am terrified of physical risk. However, when I found out from the Key Stage 3 project, the evaluation, that people were becoming rather dependent, we're finding, and this was true in the evaluation of the numeracy and literacy strategies as well, saying, just tell us what to do. And I was thinking about this changing world. I thought, we really need people to be more creative. And if children are going to be creative, teachers need to be more creative, and that requires leadership. And that's why I started doing some R&D projects around creative leadership. And that's when I did some of that interviewing around people taking risks. And when we had the findings of some of the things that help people do that, I thought, I can't go out and talk to head teachers and other people and say, these are the things you need to do to take more risk. And so I took myself off to a 7-day stand-up comedy course because I wanted to push myself. I really wanted to push myself. And it did. 7 week. I don't know if I said 7 day. 7 week. And it really challenged me. It helped me. It gave me more confidence. And the bit that I loved the most was the improvisation. And I've continued to do that. And I don't do that for the sake of going and standing on a stage. I do it for life. I do it to help me maintain that kind of optimism of being able to adapt, to adjust. And I think if our schools are creative and compassionate learning organisations surrounded by a system that is that, I feel hopeful. I think there is another element that I haven't mentioned a lot about, and I know a lot of schools and teachers do this, but there are numerous resources out there in the community, not only in universities like us, community organisations, arts, businesses, all kinds of people partners who can help us with this and who can offer other opportunities. So we can't know it all. There's a quote that I love he's no longer alive, sadly, a wonderful Malian blues player, Alpha Katore, who was also the mayor of a little town in Mali. And one of the things he said is, you can't learn the entire sea by heart. You need others. We need others. We can't store everything. We're like bees. It depends on collective intelligence. Hopefully we're like trees who, in a forest, all the fungal support below in the root system helps trees. We need each other's. We need others to help us. And I think if we do that, I feel optimistic because
it needs that kind of subterranean supportive network, I guess, as you're saying, as well as individuals and leaders to have that creative impulse. They need to be in a condition which allows them to be creative and support that. Yeah.
Yes. And part of that is creating that yourselves. Part of that is spotting opportunities.
Louise, I wish you'd been there at the start of my leadership career and passed me a note saying you can't learn the entire sea by heart. I love that phrase. It's so applicable to leadership. But speaking of improvisation, I think our bell might be about to ring, and you've already given us one golden nugget, but before we leave, we give every guest a post-it note to write something on. So here is your post-it note, and you can choose what you write on it and where you would like to stick it.
Okay. My post-it note would say, prepare children for their future, not your past. And I would like that stuck outside every school, on a whether it's a gate, public facing for anyone who goes in, anyone who walks past on a walk in the street. And if I can, I've already been difficult about and tricky maybe about my drink and my energy bar. So I want to become a desert island disc person who wants to ask a bit more. If I could possibly have my post-it note, which is going to be brightly coloured, on a poster that is brightly coloured but a different colour, so that people have to move in and really look at what that post-it note says, I'd be even happier.
I'm sure Mark can arrange that. I'd just send him off to the stationery cupboard that he's got.
You're pretty high maintenance, Louise, with your biscuits and your drinks and your poster-sized post-its, but I think we can dig one out. That bell that you can hear is sounding for the end of our podcast, Louise. As I said at the beginning, it's overdue. We should have had you here many episodes and series ago, but we're glad we got you in the end. Thank you so much. The oven has pinged, and I think these energy biscuits are ready to eat. So please take them on your way. Please leave the glass on the desk, though, because we can't have those go missing. We need those for the next guests. Thank you, Louise, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Louise.
Our thanks go to Emerita Professor Louise Stoll for sharing her lime and ginger cordial and home-baked energy biscuits with us this week in the staff room.
Please do get in touch if you'd like to be part of the conversation. Click the link at the bottom of the UCL staff room page.
And if you've enjoyed this episode, there is more where that came from. Search IOE podcast from wherever you get your podcasts to find episodes of the staff room, as well as more podcasts from the IOE.
And a quick favour before you go, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we'd really appreciate it if you would give the IOE podcast a rating. 5 stars would be nice if you're enjoying the show, and that will help us to reach more people who are interested in hearing what the staff room is all about.
Thanks so much for downloading and listening to this IOE podcast.